Joining us now for another edition of Whitney's Women is Whitney Reynolds from PBS, and you brought a friend.
I did. I brought another fantastic woman, Sarah Carlson, with the Epilepsy Foundation of Greater Chicago. This month, Brooke, is actually Epilepsy Awareness Month. Do you know what epilepsy is?
Well, it's seizures. That's all I know. And I'm sure there's much more to it than just the seizures, but that's what obviously I think I and many people associate with epilepsy.
Right, that is very true. We've actually had a couple of shows where we've brought up epilepsy, but Sarah is here to explain it a lot more because, Sarah, not only are you involved with the foundation here in Chicago, but you also have epilepsy. Is that the right terminology, have epilepsy? Or
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you do, and you actually are going to tell a little bit of your story because it impacted your whole life, and that's how you got involved with this foundation.
I landed there, whether I had a choice or not. That's true. I used to be a television news anchor, and I was doing a morning show. I know you're familiar with that. And suddenly I started having strange feelings where I would read something on a teleprompter, and I didn't remember having read it.
Oh.
But apparently I was reading it because I would go to commercial and look at my co-anchor and hold her hand.
So you were still doing things. You were going through all these.
At the time, yeah. I was feeling like nauseous and a rush of surge. And this is an electrical abnormal surge in the brain, so we knew later. It took months, though, for doctors to figure out what was going on.
Wow.
They thought hypoglycemia, something that just made you feel lightheaded. But over and over again, and not every day, but frequently, I would get through a story, have to hold on to the desk because I was afraid of what was happening, but reading a teleprompter. However, had there been no words in front of me and a camera, I wouldn't have been able to speak. That's the kind of epilepsy that I ended up being diagnosed with.
So you don't have the convulsions, the seizures that we associate with epilepsy then? You have something else. Or your epilepsy it comes out in a different way, I guess.
Absolutely, and there's such a huge range in the spectrum.
Oh, see, I didn't even know that.
Seizures. Yeah, and I've, unfortunately for me, I've had several what are now called tonic-clonic. They used to be called grand mal seizures. I had about 4 or 5 of those back in the day before they figured out why I was having seizures in the first place. Most women in their early to mid-30s don't just develop seizures out of nowhere. It turns out that I had a brain tumor. Which it also took 2 years to uncover. So I had brain surgery in 2010. Unfortunately for me, though, when you take a tumor out, or anything, for the most part, there's now scar tissue that still causes epilepsy.
So is there, I know that I had a friend that actually had a seizure in the car, and it was very, she ended up passing away from that. And is there medicine for this? Because that's my whole thing. Is like, if you find out you have epilepsy, does it just impact your whole life, or can you actually try to get it under control?
Well, that's one of the reasons why I'm here, and one of the reasons why I want so much to talk about it. It is not very well medicated or funded for research to figure out how to cure if it isn't going to be able to be medicated. About 1/3 of people who have epilepsy have no treatment that works for them, no medication, no surgery, nothing. So they have to simply live with seizures.
Now,
not fair.
I had a friend who had epilepsy, and she was on phenobarbital. And phenobarbital, I know virtually nothing about it other than I think it's a depressant. And when she was on it, she wasn't guaranteed not to have seizures, and she would have less seizures, but she would still have seizures. But what it did was it kind of made her this like emotionless, placid person, and I think that was the medicine, because I think it was a downer that she was on, and I think it just made her like emotionless, and like everything about her, she was just kind of like looking at just kind of like a blank wall.
So she wasn't seizuring anymore, but she wasn't fully
there. Well, no,
there.
that's the thing. She would still have seizures. She would have less frequent seizures.
Correct.
But she would still have them. But it kind of just took away her whole personality.
That's sad. There are so many medications out there, and thankfully, some of them work for some people and stop the seizures.
Well,
and there are also there's an implantable device that is new that is working for people that people are raving about. But what I have is partial complex seizures. So if it were to happen now, I would simply have trouble speaking. And I now, because it's in my left temporal lobe, so a large part of my brain is working when it happens. I know now to stop talking. And that's because, sadly, that the one job I was doing in the morning when I said I could read the teleprompter and everything was okay, I ended up at a different TV station after having surgery.
Okay.
And I was doing evening news and feeling pretty good. And I had one, and I thought, oh, I'll just do what I used to do. And it didn't work.
What,
and
holding onto the desk?
Nothing worked.
Nothing
worked. But I tried to keep speaking, knowing something was wrong.
Right.
And just it was gibberish. So
okay.
I could kind of laugh about it now, but really it is a terrible moment for me.
Well, it's got to be horrible and scary, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I ask you, when you would feel, when these episodes would come on, would you feel them coming? Like, would you know that it was impending?
You get a feeling, most people with epilepsy do, for about, in my case, 5 seconds. And because it's such a strong feeling, I have a hard time saying, Mom, John, someone, this is about to happen.
Right.
But the hope is that I'll have fewer and fewer when we find the right medication.
So
that's where I am now.
So your condition, finding out you had epilepsy, brought you to Chicago. Is that how you connected with the foundation? Is because you knew you needed to surround yourself with people that were kind of going through the same thing, that can understand what you're going through?
Absolutely. I was actually involved with the Epilepsy Foundation heavily in Wisconsin.
Okay.
Because having that happen as a TV news anchor in the community for all those years, instead of saying, I don't want to talk about this, it's my personal life, I took the opposite approach and said, I want to be a spokesperson for this. What do you mean? The statistic that absolutely blows my mind every time I say it is that epilepsy impacts, so people who have seizures, more of them have a seizure disorder than the autism spectrum disorder, Parkinson's, cerebral palsy, and MS combined. So when I got to Chicago, I did say, I can't just say, oh, I used to be on the board for the foundation in Wisconsin. I needed to do something here too.
Right. So you got connected. What does, you just had your 5K run with the foundation, but November is Epilepsy Awareness Month. So what does that look like? Like, what are we trying to do this month?
What they're doing really, really well is posting something I know every day to educate the community about what epilepsy is. Because as Brooke said, most people think of the tonic-clonic seizure where somebody falls to the ground and they lose consciousness eventually.
And convulsing.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what you think of.
And it's true. That is a seizure. But epilepsy is having 2 or more of any kind of seizure. Then you're diagnosed. 1 in 26 people will develop epilepsy in their lifetime.
So
those are the sorts of things that this month is about.
Any more than 2 seizures, you're considered an epileptic.
Correct.
Okay.
I'm not a doctor, so I don't know if you had one if you were a baby, and then again once when you were elderly, maybe not. Well, but yeah, they're looking at the recurrence.
Yeah, no, I was just asking because it was very strange and very random. But one of my sisters, so when she was younger, and she would get angry at her mom. It was my stepmother, and she'd get angry at her mom, and she'd throw these fits, and like any kid does, like 2, 3 years old. So she'd throw these fits, and she would hold her breath. And we used to say, you can't do that. Do not hold your breath. Do not do that. And and a little kid, she'd do it to the point where she turned blue. Well, one time she did it, and it turned into a grand mal seizure. And she's she's 40-something years old now, never had another one, but it was the weirdest, most bizarre.
By holding your breath?
Well, I don't know.
My games are going to change in the summer next year in the pool.
I don't know that that's what caused it because, like you were saying, there's so many questions out there.
Yeah, right.
They don't even have the right medication to control epilepsy.
Goodness.
So, I don't know. But it just, when I hear about seizures and, like, grand mal seizures, it flashes me back 40 years to that one day. And it was the scariest thing I'd ever seen.
Right. And we do need more people to understand what it is.
Yeah.
And that isn't the only thing that happens. Some people just go into a blank stare.
I had no idea about that.
Right. And a lot of parents are thrown off by that because their children will do that. And they'll think, oh, my kid's just spacing out or refusing to speak to me or upset about something. It's tough. And the part that I love about being somebody who's surviving, I don't call it suffering, but surviving epilepsy, is talking to other people who are impacted, like parents. And occasionally I've been able to do that and say, it's going to be okay. And frankly, children are the ones who are the most likely to outgrow epilepsy.
Oh, you can wow.
Can, but I don't have nearly the shot. I like to think that I'll get it under control more.
Right.
But yeah, children do have a chance. You have to be careful not to promise that, of course.
Well, no, you can't promise anything.
And the scary thing is with children, too, is with the organization that I've worked with in the past, is like, some of the kids die in their sleep, and that's why you have to like educate parents and families. Like,
SUDAP.
So that's why you have to that's why following this stuff not just this month, but understanding epilepsy, because it is impacting, like you said, the numbers are very high, and kids sometimes don't fully understand what is happening. And so as a parent, you have to be their advocate and keep a lookout for these signs. Where can people find out this info? Is it on Facebook, Twitter, website?
Everywhere, actually. The website is epilepsychicago.org. And they are on Facebook as well, and on Twitter at Epilepsy Chicago.
Awesome.
And you were talking about kids. I have to mention Camp Blackhawk is something the foundation started.
I've heard of this.
And it is phenomenal. And I've had the honor of going to see their talent show.
That is
and so many of these kids who have epilepsy don't have a shot at doing a lot of the same things their peers do.
Well, and I'm sure as a parent of an epileptic child, you're
gosh.
like, I don't want them doing this.
And it's something that because medical bills are so high and life has been tough, they can't afford.
Right.
So this is based entirely on donations. And now they've split it into 2 weeks of camp, and then there's a waiting list.
Great.
And they can find that on the website as well.
Absolutely. And the waiting list is the reason why they need donations and help as much as we can get. Yeah,
well, guys, make sure to pay attention. Find out about epilepsy. What's the website again?
Epilepsychicago.org.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sarah, for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, Sarah and Whitney, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brooke.